I call this meeting of the Taxes Committee to order. Our first order of business is approval of the minutes. Representative Brand, do I have a motion to approve the minutes of the April 2nd, 2024 meeting?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I reviewed the minutes and I would like to approve the April 2nd, 2024 Tax Committee minutes.
Great. Thank you, Representative Brand. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of approving the minutes signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? The motion carries. First bill on the agenda today is House File 5247. We've got Chair Gomez ready to go. Chair Gomez moves that House File 5247 be laid over for possible inclusion in the 2024 tax bill. Chair Gomez, to your bill.
Thank you very much, Chair Norris. So, I'm pleased to be presenting Governor Walz's 2024 tax budget bill today. It's pretty simple, has a few important components to it, though, and I'll just turn it back over to you, Mr. Chair, but obviously I have the Commissioner with me to go over the details. Thank you so much.
Great. Thanks, Chair Gomez, and we're glad to have Commissioner Marquardt back with us. Commissioner Marquardt, please introduce yourself for the record and proceed with your testimony.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. I am Paul Marquardt, Commissioner of the Department of Revenue, and thank you for allowing me to testify on House File 5247, Governor Walz's supplemental budget bill. Chair Gomez, thank you so much for carrying the bill. And I also want to thank the House and now the Senate for moving the NOL along. I think it's on its way to the governor's desk, so good work to all. So just kind of overall on the governor's, and I was here a week or so ago, and so I'm not going to go over everything, but I'm going to concentrate on the big part of the bill. And just overall, the entire governor's budget was $199 million in the first biennium and $27 million in the second biennium. So the overall supplemental budget is very modest, and the governor has said is we need to be cautious as we move into this session. But one big note was the largest single item out of that $199 million was the $45 million for the child tax credit payment protection pilot program. That's $45 million. And so that is really the big part of that. And I think when you look at how big of a part that was in the budget, really reinforces Governor Walz's and Lieutenant Governor Flanagan's commitment and the legislature's commitment to making the state of Minnesota the best state in the nation for kids and families, and as part of that, to eliminate child poverty. So in this tax bill, in the first year, there's $61.6 million in the first biennium and $4.8 million in the second. And if you look at the global targets that have been agreed to, this is very close to those. So if you look at the global targets, it's $53 million, but that doesn't include the NOL, which this governor's budget does. And if you included that, that'd be like 68, and then 5.2 into the tail. So it's very, very close. So what I want to do right now is talk about, again, the big priority here, and that is the Child Tax Credit Payment Protection Pilot Program and why it's important. So I just have to back up again. And last year, the governor and legislature passed a nation-leading child tax credit. And according to Columbia University, this will cut child poverty by 33%. And that has huge ramifications in terms of higher educational achievement, better wage growth into the future, stronger workforce, better economy, better healthcare outcomes, better social justice outcomes, all sorts of things. So the child tax credit is really, really important. And that started this year. And as today, $437 million have been claimed for the child tax credit, benefiting 370,000 children. And the average family benefit is about $2,100. So child tax credit is off and running. Studies show that one way to enhance the effectiveness of the child tax credit to lower child poverty is by having advanced periodic payments. And so the legislature last year authorized the commissioner to come up with that. And so next year, starting in tax year 25, with the great help of our advocates that have helped formulate this, we will be starting an advanced periodic payment. The final details haven't been decided, but basically it'll be about a 50% advance credit of the previous year's credit. So if you're getting $3,500 for 2 kids maximum, you get $1,750 in advanced payments. So we want to make sure that folks opt in and take the advanced child tax credit because we know that enhances the ability to lower that. And so the biggest obstacle for people getting into the advanced child tax credit is the fear of having to pay that advanced credit back if they get an income increase during the year. And we know that because of data that came out after the advanced earned income tax credit on the federal level that went from 1979 to 2011, only 3% used that advanced credit. And one of the major reasons the report said it was the people were hesitant to get into the program because of the fear of having to pay that back. In the state of Colorado, in Chicago, they also had advanced payment programs. And in those 2 studies also, one of the greatest obstacles for people getting into the advanced was the fear of having to pay that back. So that's why the governor and lieutenant governor has this proposal, working with advocates, to provide what you would call a safe harbor, to be able to guarantee a 50% minimum credit based on 50% of their previous credit. They would be guaranteed that regardless of what their income did, unless it went over some limits that we have. But what it does, it would allow parents to go from a part-time to a full-time job, which was one of the major things that we found in these pilot programs, that they moved from a part-time to a full-time, or a spouse or someone getting a new job, or whatever that is. You're not worried and stressed out about that occurring. And so the income limits are, you would not qualify if married joint filer, you go over $60,100 for 1 child, and that increases by $9,000 for every child you have. And if you are other filers, it'd be $49,570. This is a 4-year pilot program at a cost of $45 million, roughly about $10 million a year. And again, the reasons for this is, number one, to increase participation in the advanced child tax credit, because we know that enhances the ability of the child tax credit. It reduces parental stress during the year, and studies show stress also impacts the kids. And it allows kind of an incentive for increase in the income as the year goes on. And so, you know, $10 million, I think, and the governor strongly, lieutenant governor strongly believes this is a very good investment, because we know that if we can eliminate child poverty in the state of Minnesota, this will have transformational impact on citizens around the state. And let me just kind of put a little data on this, how important it is to eliminate child poverty if we can. There's been a number of studies, the National Academy of Science, one done at Georgetown University, one done at Washington University in St. Louis, one done at Stanford University. And what they have concluded is that this costs our economy, the fact that you have child poverty, and they estimate that cost of about $500 billion to $1 trillion a year. Roughly 4 to 5% of our GDP is lost. And it makes sense, because with child poverty, you have less kind of wage strength. You have not as strong of a workforce. You have a little bit of a slower economy because you don't have that productivity there. You have worse healthcare outcomes, which leads to more healthcare costs. You have more criminal justice costs. So the lost revenue increase in costs, they're saying it's 4 to 5% of our GDP. So what could that mean for Minnesota? So Minnesota has a lower poverty, child poverty than the rest of the states. But let's say instead of 4 to 5%, let's say it's just 1%. Let's say if we eliminated child poverty in Minnesota, it would increase our GDP by just 1%. So what would that mean in the state of Minnesota? That would be an increase in our GDP or economic output of $4 to $5 billion a year. That's like building 4 or 5 new Viking stadiums every year. Whoa. I know. I didn't want to, but I needed to put that in perspective. So, and according to the budget forecast that just came out, the total personal income is about $428 billion in Minnesota for 2024. Take 1% of that, that's over $4 billion. And if we bring in $15 billion a year from income taxes, 1% is $150 million that could increase just those revenues because you have higher wages, stronger workforce, more profits, better economy. We're talking just 1%. Add on to that sales taxes because of a more robust economy. Add to that corporate profits because of a more robust and stronger workforce. Because of stronger healthcare outcomes, you'd have less healthcare costs, less costs other places. So you're looking at $10 million here for this, basically the safe harbor, that is really going to enhance and protect this program that we know studies have shown can reduce child poverty. And, you know, the potential benefits of eliminating child poverty in Minnesota are great. As I said before, I think it's transformational. And I think it's really exciting on what the governor, lieutenant governor, and the legislature have done in the last few years on what type of an impact that's going to have in the future on Minnesotans around this state. And is it a monumental task to eliminate child poverty? Yes. But we have a great start to do that. And so I think it's important that we have all hands on deck when it comes to the child tax credit. I think we need to make the child tax credit as effective as it can be. And the CTC payment protection pilot helps do that. And so if we get this right, the results could be amazing for not only the families who are in poverty and lifting them out of poverty, but for the quality of life for the entire state of Minnesota. So members, Mr. Chair, I can talk about more in the bill. I think I did the other day, but this is really the big thing. And that's why having this safe harbor in place is just absolutely crucial to the success and effectiveness of lowering child poverty on this child tax credit program, which we're leading the nation right now. Let's just continue. I know this is a huge task, but we can do it if we have all hands on deck. So thank you, Mr. Chair and members.
Great. Thank you, Commissioner Marquardt. We're going to go to a couple of other testifiers first, and then I know we've got an amendment, and we'll have member discussion at that point. Next up is Nan Madden from the Minnesota Budget Project. Please introduce yourself for the record and proceed with your testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. My name is Nan Madden. I'm director of the Minnesota Budget Project, and I'm very happy to have this opportunity to speak today on the provisions of this bill related to successful implementation of the Minnesota Child Tax Credit. As you know, the 2023 tax bill created a nation-leading Minnesota Child Tax Credit. More than 1/3 of Minnesota families with children are estimated to qualify, which means they'll be better able to afford the basic expenses of raising thriving children. The 2023 tax bill also permitted the Minnesota Department of Revenue to establish a process for families to choose to receive a portion of their child tax credit in advance through periodic payments instead of only in one lump sum after they have filed their taxes. Advance payments gets money into the pockets of Minnesota families sooner and better matches up with how families pay their bills. Advance payments are a successful approach that has been tested on the federal level. In 2021, the federal government temporarily expanded their child tax credit and delivered 50% of the value of that credit to families through monthly payments during part of the year. Families were better off and they faced less hardship in the months that they received those advanced CTC payments. I've provided the committee with a letter that describes a set of design principles that we and nearly 40 of our partners believe are important in implementing advanced periodic payments. These principles reflect learnings from hearing directly from Minnesota families, as well as best practice recommendations from the field. The bill before you today includes important provisions that follow those design principles. As you heard, one of the challenges that families face is the worry that by participating in advanced periodic payments, there might be some negative consequence because it's hard for families to precisely predict their future income. Low-income folks in particular may be relying on multiple jobs. They might not be scheduled for the same number of hours of work every week. So it's harder to predict what your future income is going to be. The minimum credit provisions in this bill protects families who have increased their incomes from one year to the next. This bill also recognizes the importance of having resources and the infrastructure for successful implementation. There are pros and cons for families for receiving advanced periodic payments. And for us to truly empower families to choose what's best for them, they need to get good information and have the ability to interact with the tax system and opt out if advanced payments end up not meeting their needs. And while it isn't in this bill, we think it's also important that volunteer tax preparation services and other organizations who work with families have financial and informational resources to provide support and guidance to families in making the decisions about advanced periodic payments and what works best for them. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today, and we look forward to further conversation about how to implement a family-centered system to implement advanced payments of the child tax credit.
Great. Thank you, Nan Madden. Next up is Deborah Fitzpatrick from the Children's Defense Fund, Minnesota. Please introduce yourself for the record and proceed with your testimony.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Norris, members of the committee. My name is Deborah Fitzpatrick, and I'm the Director of Policy and Research at Children's Defense Fund, Minnesota. At CDF Minnesota, we work with community partners statewide to help families access tax credits and other work supports through our Bridge to Benefits and Economic Stability Indicator tools so that they can achieve economic stability for themselves and their children. We're here today to express our support for the provisions included in House File 5247 related to the child tax credit, particularly, as has already been mentioned, the robust, effective implementation of advance payments and protections related to income changes. Through our experience working with families in networks across the state, as well as facilitation of several focus groups, surveys, and listening sessions across the state, we have heard overwhelmingly that the option of receiving advanced CTC payments is very important for families' ability to budget and support healthy development of their children. Advance payments more closely align to how families manage their lives and the many costs associated with raising a family. In order to make this option a reality for families, however, we recognize and support the administrative funding necessary for successful implementation. And while this option is important for families, in all our focus groups on CTC advance payments, families did express concern about how small increases in income might result in them having to pay back money to the state. Given these concerns, we do appreciate the inclusion of a minimum payment approach that provides greater predictability for families and addresses a potential disincentive to rejoin the workforce, take on extra hours, or a new higher paying job. On behalf of the families we work with across the state, we look forward to partnering with you and the administration to successfully implement advance payments of the state child tax credit and to ensure it advances our shared goal of creating a state where every child thrives. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you, Deborah Fitzpatrick. Any other members of the public who wish to testify on House File 5247? All right. Seeing none, Representative Robbins, I know you have the A1 amendment. Would you like to move the A1 amendment?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, I move the A1.
All right. Representative Robbins moves the A1 amendment. To your amendment, Representative Robbins.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Chair Gomez. I am a supporter of the tax credit, and I'm a supporter of the advance payment option. What I'm not a supporter of is this idea that we're creating a guaranteed minimum credit, because I think it's not going to work the way it's being sold by the department and even by the testifiers here today. And it's going to cause the problems that people don't think are happening. So how it works in the current law as structured is you would get to keep the, you get your 50% advance payment. And if you are under the income threshold of this, let's just use the one child number, 60,100, and you end up getting to keep that extra that we talked about last time, that's true. But if your income goes above that 60,000, it's a cliff and you do have to repay it back. So we are telling families that they won't have to repay it back if they increase their incomes, but in fact, if they cross over that 60,100 threshold or whatever it is based on the number of kids, they will. And so we've created a phase out and keeping the minimum throughout the phase out, but then when you get to the 60,000, it's a cliff and you have to repay it. And it's crazy confusing. So what my amendment does is it takes the confusion away and it expands it takes that 45 million that's going into the pilot and it's taking the 7 million that's using to administer this, which is a lot of money, and it's combining that and just saying, no, let's use that to bump up the thresholds so that more people qualify. And it expands into the middle class more. And so I know the goal is laudable, the intent is laudable, but I think there's a fundamental misunderstanding. People are being told they will not have to repay if they get this. And if you cross that 60,100, you absolutely are out of the safe harbor and will have to repay. And that is a disincentive for people to participate. As we've seen in these other studies, it's a disincentive for people to earn more money and better their fiscal household income. So I think we're misrepresenting how this is going to work in practice, and I think it would be cleaner and easier for families and for the state to just put that 45 million plus the 7 million into expanding the credit itself. That's the amendment. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Representative Robbins. We've got a list started, but first, if Chair Gomez, you want to respond?
Or I can go last. I don't know what you would like me to do.
It's up to you.
That's fine. Maybe we can have the discussion and I'll go last. If you don't
Okay.
mind, Mr. Chair.
Yep, no problem.
Thank you.
Next, Representative Koznick.
Mr. Chair, I think I'll just speak on the bill overall at the end.
Mr. Chair. I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
Representative
I have
Robbins.
a bill and a constituent up in another committee, so if I bail, that's why I'm leaving. And no disrespect to my colleagues, I'm sorry. But Chair Davids is ready to take it on.
All right. Any further member discussion to the amendment, the A1 amendment? All right. Seeing none,
I would like a roll call.
roll call having been requested, roll call will be granted. Chair Gomez to the A1 amendment.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I'm glad to hear that you're now a supporter of the credit and a supporter of periodic payments, because I just want to remind everybody, no Republican voted for this incredible expansion of this credit last year. So, you know, if you've had a change of heart and you now believe that we should do this, I'm very thankful for that. However, this is, you know, I think that the commissioner talked about, and the testifiers talked about the value of periodic payments in people's lives. You know, in 2021, I think it was the American Rescue Plan expanded the federal child tax credit. It was they increased the overall amount, $3,600 for a kid under 6, I think, and $3,000 for a child between 6 and 17. And they did kind of a similar thing to what we're doing here, 50% advanced periodic payment. And this was transformational in people's lives. This was really, we're talking about folks who are really, trying to make things happen for their kids on very low incomes. And so a couple $100 extra a month really made a huge difference in people's lives. And, it was the first time that a tax credit, a refundable tax credit had been administered like that. And, it's there there's all this analysis by the Census Bureau about the impact on the month-to-month supplemental child poverty rate that you can go and check out. Cut child poverty month-to-month by half in our country. And, if you speak to probably some of us in this room, were beneficiaries of that program. And during that really challenging financial time, it made a huge difference to people. I think that it's important that, we don't get too, in our policymaking, that we don't get too caught in our own experiences, and that we're able to try to think more expansively about what it's like for those, a family making $35,000 a year with a couple kids trying to make their bills every month in the face of, increases in price that we're all seeing, regardless of our income. In basics, in housing and electricity and heat and, groceries and all of the rest of it. And so, the difference between, a refundable credit that you get in a chunk in, February or March or whenever you're able to file versus getting a little bit of it each month can be really profound. Because if you talk to our advocates, they'll tell you about, things like, people putting their kids back to school clothes on a credit card, or getting getting sort of a predatory payday loan in order to make ends meet in anticipation of that chunk of money that if you're a low-income person, you usually get in February or March or April or whenever you file your taxes. And so, of course, there are financial implications of using, of basically borrowing money in order to make ends meet in anticipation of this, of your refundable credit that you get when you file your taxes. So this just, in the economics of a family, it really just makes sense. And so it's worth us doing what we need to do to kind of figure out. I mean, I agree with you in a lot of things. Like, I would like us to be able to extend this to everybody who gets the child tax credit. And I think that we should be moving toward that. Also, to your point, I mean, this is a new thing that we're asking our Department of Revenue to do. And so that's why it is a pilot program, and we are going to learn lessons and figure out how to make it easier to communicate with folks about, and make sure that we iron out any kind of problems that we encounter when we're doing it. But and I'm glad, of course, if we had an unlimited amount of money, we know that it's not just the lowest income people who are having trouble making ends meet. We have the highest child tax credit in the country. It's $1,750 a child. Any of us who have a little kid know $1,750 is not the cost annually of raising a child, right? It's a little bit higher. So, obviously I agree that there are definitely like a lot of other families that could be helped by the child tax credit if we were able to expand the income thresholds. And I think that we did the best that we could within kind of the budgetary parameters that we had to ensure that we were really targeting it to the people who needed it the most, making sure that we were including, families, larger family sizes, making sure that we were including people who were excluded from other refundable credits. And so, I think that we did a lot in the program design to try to make it as effective as possible. But, basically like gutting the periodic payments, which again, I just can't stress to you like what the federal periodic payments meant to people. But gutting that program in order to temporarily extend the tax credit a little bit up the income scale, I just don't think that it's the right policy choice. And I'm really excited and thankful to the governor and to the commissioner and his staff and to the advocates for working so hard to try to get us to the point where we have this program design and to the governor for prioritizing this so much in his budget, because this is really going to make a huge difference month to month, day to day, in putting money in people's pocketbooks on the kind of schedule that their bills come, not just once a year, because the bills come every month. And so if we can move more toward the support that we have for low-income families, aligning with the actual economic realities that people are living with, then that is all to the good. And so I would ask members to vote no on this amendment. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Chair Gomez. We did have a couple of members want to chime in here. Lead Davids.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And normally you let the chair go last, but the chair said something that can't go unchallenged here. When the chair said something like no Republican voted for the bill, that's true, and that we've had a change of heart on tax credits, that's not true. A tax bill, an omnibus tax bill, is a behemoth. Let me give an example. Anything that I put in it, of course, is very good and will be supported by all. That being said, there are many things, and you were gracious enough, Madam Chair, to put some very good things in that tax bill, but overall, a bill that basically wipes out an $18 billion surplus, spends another $10 billion, puts us in structural deficit in the out biennium. I don't know how you, no Republican voted for that. That's a true statement. But having a change of heart on several provisions that Republicans may have favored, I think is unfortunate. As chair, the longest serving chair of this committee ever, with I think a couple tied, I always try not to say Republican or say Democrat. Because then you get guys like me with discussions that would have been unnecessary otherwise. So there's no change of heart on what we support in that tax bill. I support a lot of stuff in that tax bill. There's a lot of stuff I couldn't support, and I couldn't vote for it. But I don't think there's any change of heart. First of all, you'd have to have a heart to be able to change it, right, Mr. Chair? So obviously, I didn't have a change of heart. So I wish we'd just be a little more careful, because to say that all of a sudden we're supporting, like we support the whole tax bill, that's not, last year's tax bill, that's not correct. So I hope we're a little bit more careful on some of the comments we make. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Lead Davids. To Representative Anderson.
I want to, thank you. I want to actually speak in the bill overall. So.
Perfect. Thanks for that clarification. We'll go lastly to Representative Robbins for any final comments before we take the roll.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Chair Gomez. And to be clear, agreeing with everything Chair David said, there was a lot I didn't support in last year's tax bill. So there were lots of reasons I voted no. But also, if we really want to help families, I think the most important thing we can do is reduce the tax rate. So I want to be very clear on that. But given where we are and that this is the chessboard we have, my concern about how this safe harbor is drafted is that it doesn't do what we are telling the public it does. And that is that they won't have to repay the minimum credit. Because they will if they earn more than $60,100. And so all the reasons of doing it the way you're designing it to get more people to participate, they will still have all those fears and hesitations, or they will be disincentivized to work more. And so with that, Mr. Chair, that is why I'm bringing the amendment, and I ask for member support. Thank you.
With that, Ms. Sabis will take the roll on the A1 amendment.
Chair Gomez.
Gomez, no.
Chair Gomez, no. Vice Chair Norris.
No.
Vice Chair Norris, no. Lead Davids.
Yes.
Lead Davids, yes. Representative Agbadje.
No.
Agbadje, no. Representative Anderson.
Yes.
Anderson, yes. Representative Brand.
No.
Brand, no. Representative Elkins.
No.
Elkins, no. Representative Howard.
No.
Representative Howard, no. Representative Joy.
Yes.
Joy, yes. Representative Kosnick.
Yes.
Kosnick, yes. Representative Lee.
Lee votes no.
Lee, no. Representative Lislegard.
No.
Lislegard, no. Representative Olson B.
Yes.
Olson B, yes. Representative Olson L. No. Olson L, no. Representative Pinto.
No.
Pinto, no. Representative Robbins.
Yes.
Robbins, yes. Representative Smith.
No.
Smith, no. Representative Swedzinski, excused. Representative Weiner.
Yes.
Weiner, yes. Representative Whitty, excused. Representative Joachim.
No.
Joachim, no. Mr. Chair, there being 7 ayes, 12 nays, and 2 members excused.
There being 7 ayes, 12 nays, the amendment is not adopted. On to discussion on the bill. Representative Koznick first.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Chair Gomez, I'm still a little confused, not completely confused, just a little. Maybe you can clarify on the tagline of eliminating a third of child poverty in the state of Minnesota. We had this discussion a little bit. I appreciate that we were followed up with some additional information on that. Why are we only eliminating a third of child poverty? Why not closer to 100%?
Chair Gomez.
Because we're not spending a couple $1 billion, which is what it would take to eliminate child poverty completely.
Representative Koznick.
Thank you. Well, you know, a lot of times around here, we pass a bill and we say, if it helps just one child, it would be worth it. But here, we're choosing to leave out 2/3 of the children that are in poverty. And we cite some data here. Do you know on the data with the at the request of the commissioner from Columbia University, do you know how that data was arrived?
Chair Gomez.
Just to clarify, this, as you heard from the commissioner, this child tax credit has already helped 400,000 kids. So I wouldn't minimize the impact that this is already having in people's lives. As to the methodology of the Columbia University study, I would ask, for an assist from Mr. Williams probably on that. But, it's a short memo. You can probably read through it and learn a little bit about the methodology and the sample size, et cetera.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Koznick.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Mr. Chair. Well, in that sample, it says, we caution that the Minnesota sample size in our data set is small. And so I think we should recognize that when we tout that we're going to eliminate childhood poverty by a third. As the sample size of Minnesota residents and children, or children in poverty, was only 139 kids in the state of Minnesota when this was done. So their estimates, this is by the people that provided the data, given this, our estimates should be interpreted with caution and are less precise than they would be with a larger sample size. And so I just think it'd be more transparent to the Minnesotans that are expecting childhood poverty to be reduced by a third, that we're not really using great ample sample size. And so I get a little hearing that we're going to reduce child poverty by a third all the time. It gets a little tedious when I'm not sure that I think the data shows that we're going to be effective, but yet we are spending, I think $400 million was already put in here. So knowing this, in the bill, last year we didn't have it, but this year you have, is there metrics that we can measure or reporting back to this committee or the legislature on how effective this will be?
Chair Gomez.
Thank you. So as you'll notice, when the commissioner talked about it earlier and when I talk about this publicly, that what I say is it's estimated by a Columbia University study that it will reduce child poverty by a third. Certainly with any kind of projection, there are caveats to it. And so that is a projection. That's why that's the way that we talk about it. There are certainly there are, things that could influence that and that could, there are other factors outside of the child tax credit that could raise or lower child poverty, as we kind of discussed the other day. But as you know from reading the bill, there is not a study requirement in the bill. Thank you.
Representative Koznick.
Mr. Chair, I would encourage the author to perhaps try to put some constraints on there so we would know as a committee, as a state, as taxpayers of Minnesotans, how effective this is or isn't. We did, as Chair Davids had mentioned, we did have a $20 billion surplus, and we increased taxes $10 billion. We increased the size of state government budget by over 40% this biennium here. And so we did have the opportunity. We could have tripled this and helped more kids. And so if you're going to cite the data, I think if you're not certain that what I'm saying, that we could have tripled this and helped all kids in poverty, you should make sure that the data that you're citing is accurately reflected and that it is a small sample size and there are other metrics. And I still have big reservations that the amount of investment that we are putting towards this is not actually going to reduce childhood poverty in the state of Minnesota by a third.
Representative Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have two questions. My first is maybe to the staff or to the commissioner, but I don't understand why we're setting up a child tax credit account separately from the general fund, why we need to do that. I mean, I understand why we need, the $45 million to cover the payments that probably shouldn't have been made if the program was the way it was, but why are we setting up a separate account?
Ms. Templin.
Mr. Chair, Representative Anderson, in your packet, you should have a revenue estimate for the governor's bill and Representative Gomez's bill. And you can see on the revenue estimate, there is a transfer from the general fund or out of the general fund into a special revenue account in fiscal '25, and that's $45 million. That account is then used to pay for the child tax credit in fiscal year '26, '27, '28, and '29. And the effect that has in terms of the fiscal impact on the general fund is that it reduces the cost to the general fund of the payment of the pilot, the child tax credit pilot. And so that account then is approximately $10 million a year is transferred to the general fund to offset the general fund costs.
Thank you, Ms. Templin. Representative Anderson.
Thank you. Wouldn't it just be more logical to just simply put the 20 million in for this cycle and then to deal with the rest in the future rather than setting up a revolving fund, a special revenue? I mean, why?
Madam,
Chair Gomez,
Yes.
did you want
Sure,
to?
yeah, that's not really a question for fiscal staff. I mean,
Yeah.
it's a policy choice. I guess you could say, oh, one's more or less logical, but they're choices that the governor made. So, I mean, I don't really, you can differ you can have a different opinion than the administration about how to structure it, and that's fine, but this is what they chose to do.
Representative Anderson.
Thank you. Is the commissioner still here?
The commissioner is not still here.
Or is someone from the Department of Revenue here?
Ms. Bears is here. See her making her way to the dais. Thank you, Ms. Bears. Please introduce yourself for the record and proceed with your testimony.
Mr. Chair, members, my name is Joanna Bears. I'm the Legislative Director for the Department of Revenue. And Mr. Chair, Representative Anderson, the reason is because this is a pilot program, so we wanted to take the money out for the pilot program and put into account so we knew it could be used and dedicated for this pilot program. So that $45 million comes out, sits in that account so that we can use it each year for the pilot program, and then the remaining would go back to the general fund if it wasn't used after the pilot program was done.
Representative Anderson.
Okay, thank you. I won't come to that. I do have, so my second question will be directed at Ms. Bears too, that it would also seem to me that if you set this up so it was paying forward or paying backwards, rather than right now, someone would get a refund, they'd get the child tax credit next February when they filed, then they're starting their payments after that, then they're worried about this. We're spending a ton of money on administrative costs. We're creating a whole new program. If, as the Chair Gomez stated, which I agree with, that there's a value in periodic payments and the difference is profound in periodic payments, why, did the department think about structuring this so that the payments are actually made after someone files their taxes, rather than getting a lump sum in February, they're made over the course of the next 12 months? It's the same dollars. It eliminates this entire problem. It solves the Chair Gomez talked about periodic payments versus a big check once a year. Was there discussion at the department about that?
Ms. Bears.
Mr. Chair, Representative, there was a lot of discussion that happened to try to find something that would work. And I think, we looked at, doing these advance payments, we looked at looking back at the payment that's been made. One of the reasons we don't want to do that look back and take that payment or that credit that you would have gotten and paid it out is because that's money we're holding on to longer than we need to be holding on to it. So we want to make sure folks can get the money that is earned or what they can claim as soon as possible. And so you have to kind of look forward in order to do that.
Okay, I won't ask any more questions. Thank you.
Representative Joy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Chair Gomez, one of the things, when I look at this and I hear what you're saying about getting money back in people's pockets for the child poverty, like on a monthly basis, not more or less waiting until the end of the year and keeping fingers crossed when the taxes come. And that, I guess I would encourage moving forward, we should really look at that lowest tier tax bracket about dropping that, because what will happen is when people take their paychecks home, they're going to see more in their pocket on a weekly, biweekly, on a monthly basis. And I think that would also impact families and child poverty if we would look at redoing that tax bracket. I know it's going to cost more, and that's going to be the big factor, and everybody will get it. But I really think as people are struggling in Minnesota right now, and with child tax rate, everything, I think it's great what you're doing and getting money back to people so they can live month to month. But I also think we should really consider looking at dropping that lowest tier tax bracket so that people feel it in their paychecks every time when they get it on a weekly, biweekly, or monthly basis. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Joachim.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I just want to thank Chair Gomez for carrying the governor's bill. Like all good chairs do, we always carry the governor and lieutenant governor's bill for discussion, which has been a robust one. And I also want to kind of remind us, in taxes, sometimes we think of things in a silo, but I know you don't. And I know when we talk about child poverty, we talk about it across all our different areas. So when we talk about decreasing child poverty by a third, we're also talking about the investments we made in housing. We're talking about the investments we made in healthcare for kids to have access so they can start out their life healthy. We're also talking about investments in transportation so their parents can get to work. We're also talking about investments in childcare so their parents can work. We're talking about investments in education, universal meals in and of itself, feeding kids when they're at school. All of that goes into how we look at helping children and families out of poverty. So not just the child tax credit, which lifts up a tremendous amount, and it's been proven at the national level as well during COVID, but just looking at our whole budget as a whole in Minnesota and what we've done, I would hazard a guess it's probably more than a third. So thank you, Chair.
Lee Davids.
Mr. Chairman, I'll pass.
All right. Any final remarks, Chair Gomez?
Just appreciate the consideration by the committee, and thank you to the governor and the administration for bringing this bill forward.
And with that, Chair Gomez renews her motion that House File 5247 is laid over for possible inclusion in the 2024 tax bill. The bill is laid over. All right, moving quickly on to the next bill, House File 5248. Chair Gomez moves that House File 5248 be laid over for possible inclusion in the 2024 tax bill. Chair Gomez to the bill.
Thank you very much. The House File 5248 is the long-awaited public finance bill. We'll probably take another hour on this, I assume. So that's about it, Mr. Chair. That's all I got to say about the bill.
Great. Thanks, Chair Gomez. And I see we've already got Joe Bagnoli there in the testifier's seat. Please introduce yourself for the record and proceed with your testimony.
Sure, Mr. Chair, members of the committees. My name is Joe Bagnoli. I'm with the law firm of Winthrop & Weinstein, and I represent the Minnesota Institute of Public Finance. As I've said before, first I'd like to thank Chair Gomez for introducing the bill. The Institute of Public Finance every year are the people, the lawyers, the bankers, and the financial advisors that that advise and issue debt on behalf of cities, counties, school districts, all public entities that issue debt. We tend to regard this as sort of the public finance technical bill. Through the course of the year, we look for places where there is places to make it clearer, harmonize the law where the federal government has made changes, but mostly to make it clear. So it's much like what the department does with the technical bill, we've done with this bill. It's not meant to be controversial in any way. As you can see, my voice is a little bit rough. I might rely on Council Clayman to help out. Plus, he knows this stuff a little bit better than I do. My colleague, the people that I represent, there is a large, scintillating, continuing legal education meeting in Chicago right now of all public finance attorneys, and so I am left without my star witness. So it's me and Council Clayman. So just to run through it, and I'm actually going to ask if you wouldn't mind running through the education parts of this first couple of sections.
Mr. Clayman, if you could give us just a high-level overview of the bill, please.
Sure. Mr. Chair and members, sections 1 through 3 of the bill relate to public financing provisions for school bonds, and specifically with regard to the review and comment requirements by the Department of Education that is imposed with related to the issuance of those bonds. There was also a few changes last year that were enacted by the legislature, and so there's some technical changes to this and some cleanup language that is being done in sections 1 through 3, in addition to some clarifying changes. Two, I think one, like a more substantive change I'd call the committee's attention to is in section 1 where the dollar thresholds under which you're exempt from the review and comment procedures are being modified so that it's based on the funding for the project and not the type of project. And I'm happy, Mr. Chair, to go into more detail if you'd like, but that's the mile-high view.
Thank you, Mr. Clayman. Any other members of the public who wish to testify? I didn't think so. Any member discussion on the bill? All right, didn't think so. No further comments from Chair Gomez, and with that, the chair renews her motion that House File 5248 is laid over for possible inclusion in the 2024 tax bill. The bill is laid over.
All right, up next, we have House File 3992 from Chair Lislegard. Chair Lislegard is going to move that House File 3992, the first engrossment, be re-referred to the Ways and Means Committee. Chair Lislegard, to your bill.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair and committee members. House File 3992 is a critical first step designed to help rural ambulance services in their operating. And I've had the pleasure to travel the state of Minnesota with both Democrat and Republicans on a task force to really bring awareness to this issue. And I just got to call out Representative Hewitt and Representative Backer and Senator Seeberger, who really taught and asked the right questions across the state of Minnesota. But one of the things that we saw is that this system created a long time ago is failing. And for multiple reasons, and our testifier, Mr. Simonson, will elaborate on that. But we are at a tipping point, and I think it's really, really important that there's gap funding, and this is for $122.5 million. And this is to stop the bleeding while we re-examine the system as a whole and how can we improve it. And there does need to be changes made with the whole EMS system and, the reimbursement rates at a federal level and a state level and some of the stuff that we can't control. But in rural, the aging population, the less people that are volunteering, the more of the mandates, the farther distance, all these things are starting to add up, and we're at a critical state. So that's what this bill does. Before we get there, guardrails are extremely important. And so before I turn it over to Eric, if I could, Madam Chair, I would like Mr. Swanson to go through the bill and explain the guardrails put in place in this bill.
Excellent. Thank you, Chair Lislegard. Mr. Swanson.
Madam Chair and members, so just a high-level overview. The bill would provide a one-time appropriation of $122.5 million to the Commissioner of Revenue to make aid payments to ambulance service providers in 2024. In order to receive the aid, the providers would need to submit an application by September 16th of this year. Aid amounts would be equal to the amount by which a provider's expenses exceeded their revenue in 2022. The aid payments would be made from the Commissioner of Revenue directly to the ambulance service providers in December of this year. And then subdivision 7, which is starting on the bottom of page 3 of the actual bill language, provides for a report to be submitted from the ambulance service providers as to how the aid was spent. So the report would need to be submitted by the end of 2025 and would need to include the amount of aid that each service provider received, the amount of aid that they received that was spent on operational expenses, how much of the aid was spent on capital expenses, and any documentation sufficient to establish that the aid was spent by the recipient within their primary service area in the state of Minnesota.
Thank you, Mr. Swanson. Chair Lislegard, did you have any more comments, or should we move to testifiers?
Testifiers, fine.
Wonderful. Welcome, Mr. Simonson. Please just state your name as you get started with your testimony.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Eric Simonson. I work for the law firm of Flaherty and Hood, representing the Coalition of Greater Minnesota Cities. The coalition is made up of about 120 cities, all located in Greater Minnesota, and we are here in full support of House File 3992, the first engrossment. And I think it's also important to point out to the committee members why we care so much about this bill. If you look at the ambulance licenses that are distributed across the state, more than half of them are held by some local unit of government. We're very grateful to Representative Lislegard and all of the co-authors that are on this bill. We couldn't have gotten it this far without the help of a lot of members, and Representative Lislegard has done a great job in promoting why this bill is important. We're also grateful to the 41 organizations that have signed on to this handout, which should be in your packet. I think it really speaks clearly to the advocates for a reliable and a sustainable EMS system across Minnesota and why that system is being challenged today, at least in the financial sense. We spent a lot of time over the last interim within our own organization, traveling around the state and meeting with member cities that actually have a license and operate a municipal ambulance service. And we heard very consistently that the challenges with the reimbursement model and workforce are the top two issues facing our rural ambulance systems. We also follow the legislative task force, which did a great job and had a number of field hearings across the state of Minnesota, and we heard the same thing there. It's funding and it's workforce. I want to just point out three critical points in the bill. I think it's been covered very well, and of course, you just heard from Mr. Swanson as well. But just for clarification and as to what Representative Lislegard said, this is a literal Band-Aid. We all understand as advocates of this bill that it's our diligence has to be to come back here in 2025 with some sort of a sustainable solution. This doesn't solve the problem. It just gets us, buys us some time, gets us into 2025. The $122 million amount is not an arbitrary amount. It literally represents the amount of loss that's being reported in calendar year 2022 across the state of Minnesota. So if you add that up across all the EMS regions, that's the number that you will come to if you use the formula that's within the bill. Lastly, not $1 will go where it's not supposed to. This bill is not designed to give any money to any ambulance service that reported a profit in that same time period. We're really trying to focus in on the ones that are struggling, and if it seems like a lot of money, it should really reflect what the scope of the problem is. Madam Chair, I'd be certainly available for any questions, but that would conclude my testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Simonson. Is there anybody else present who wishes to testify on House File 3992? Not seeing any, we'll move to member discussion. All right, not seeing any. Oh, sorry. Representative Brand.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think one of the things that we need to point out in this whole situation is that this isn't just a state issue, it's also a federal issue. And I really want to call attention to the fact that the reimbursement rates that a lot of these ambulance services are finding themselves in these situations for is because these reimbursement rates really haven't been changed at the federal level for a very long time. And I feel like at the federal level, if they're making states spend this sort of money and more, and we're going to have to do more as a state to really do a good job, I think, of stabilizing the actual issues at hand. I think that's a negligence on Congress's part to do the actual job of making these reimbursement rates what they should be. And we're looking at some of these districts. We toured the state. I'm on the commission, or the task force rather. We went up to Mountain Iron and we listened to some of the folks. Reimbursement rates are $1,200 if you have insurance, but in a lot of these populations, the vast majority of people who live in these districts, and some of these PSAs are 1,500 square miles, by the way, and the reimbursement rates for some of these communities is $433 for anybody on public assistance, anybody that's on Medicare, especially in the northeast region of the state. A lot of people retire up there. And so that's part of the reason why it's such a high rate. But I think at the end of the day, we need to really also ask our federal partners to pony up, because I think this isn't just a state issue, and it's not just a Minnesota issue. This is an issue our entire country has to face, and that's where our federal partners really need to get with the program.
Representative Davids.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members. I would first of all like to thank Representative Lislegard for carrying this and the other authors of the bill. And I almost broke one of my tenets as a former tax chair in that bring ideas, great ideas, before the committee. We'll talk about the money later. The one thing that I saw here was the governor's proposing $16 million. I believe that's right. And this bill is $122.5 million. So I'm not going to get hung up on that today. But what I really want to emphasize is how important this is, for the entire state, the metro area, but especially out there in rural Minnesota. Like you said, two things: money and manpower. Those are the two issues. So this is a Band-Aid, even at the $122 million, let alone $16 million. And I'm not going to get hung up on that today, because if we had all the bills before us and add them all up, it'd be 60 bazillion over what we can do. But this, and Chair Gomez, I thank you for hearing this bill today, because this is a very, very important issue all across the state. And I think we do need to do some funding at this point. I don't know what the magic number is, but I think bigger than that, I think we need to get great minds like Buck McAlpin, or just, shouldn't start mentioning names, but folks like that to say, in your perfect world, how do we fix this? Because we have to fix it. You can only do so many Band-Aids. And at some point, I know today's not the day for that, but thanks for bringing this bill. Chair, thanks for hearing this bill. This is a very, very important bill that we need to move forward. I don't know what the magic number is, but hopefully we can come up with that magic number.
Thank you, Representative Davids. Any other member conversation before we go back? Chair Lislegard.
Thank you, Madam Chair and committee members. Yes, this is a critical issue that we need to find a way to support it, both from a structural standpoint and from a financial standpoint. So I'd appreciate any consideration moving forward. Thank you.
All right, with that, Chair Lislegard renews his motion that House File 3992, the first engrossment, be re-referred to the Ways and Means Committee. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, no. Motion carries, and the bill is re-referred to the Ways and Means Committee. Next up is House File 4992, Representative Coulter. Welcome. Sorry, 4994. You wrote it right. I said it wrong. All right, so I'm going to move that House File 4994 be laid over for possible inclusion in the 2024 tax bill. And I understand, Representative Coulter, that you have an amendment coded A1 in our packets. Do you want to move that now?
Why don't we go through the bill first, and it'll be a little easier to explain the amendment.
Okay, sounds good. To your bill.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members, and I'm going to apologize in advance for my voice. Those of you who have young kids know that no one gets through this season unscathed. Excuse me. So a number of public financing tools exist to help address the needs of our communities that we have for housing, economic development, and public facilities. But the ability to do so should not come at the cost of workers' lives and livelihoods. House File 4994 addresses three particular forms of public support for development and construction: tax increment financing, or TIF, low-income housing tax credits, and sales tax exemptions on certain public projects. All of these tools provide critical public support on projects that sometimes would not happen without them. But we also know that these tools can be, and indeed have been, used by developers who abuse and exploit workers. A recent study that you should all have in your packet shows that since 2016, $31 million of low-income housing tax credit funding went to problem contractors, and another $53 million in TIF funding did so. In other words, over 80 million public dollars, that we know of, I should say, have gone to developers who have engaged in wage theft and other exploitative practices. TIF in particular, frankly, was the reason that I started down this path with this bill, because TIF is problematic in particular because districts are created at the local level, where oversight can be uneven at best. And because TIF leverages expected increases in property taxes, the cost to taxpayers is often not directly seen. So what this bill does is it adds both TIF and low-income housing tax credits to the list of forms, of financial assistance that fall under our existing prevailing wage requirements, and would add projects owned by cities, counties, and school districts that receive certain sales tax exemptions to those that require prevailing wage as well. Doing so will add transparency on the part of developers and give the state of Minnesota the tools necessary to hold them accountable for exploitation and abuse. Most importantly, it will protect the integrity of public investment in whatever form it takes. And so with that, I would ask that we move forward with the A1 amendment.
All right, thank you, Representative Coulter. So I'm going to move that we adopt the A1 amendment. Do you want to discuss or just explain the amendment
Yeah,
briefly?
just quickly. So the A1 amendment changes a portion of the effective date and really just clarifies that what the bill does to tax increment financing applies to TIF districts for which the request for certification was made on or after August 1st, 2024. Just sort of clarifying and I think taking a cleaner approach to how the bill handles TIF.
Excellent. Is there any discussion on the A1 amendment? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, no. Motion carries. The A1 is adopted. The bill is in the form the author would like. So we're going to move now to testifiers. I have a lot of testifiers. I'm going to ask you guys to really keep it brief. 2 minutes or less, please. So first up is Jake Schwitzer. Next is John Bosch. I apologize if I'm mispronouncing your name. If you're on deck, please just come down to this corner so we can do a quick switch. Welcome to the committee, Mr. Schweitzer. Please just identify yourself for the record as you get started with your testimony.
Thank you, Chair Gomez, members of the committee. My name is Jake Schweitzer. I am the Executive Director of North Star Policy Action, and we're a think tank that promotes data-driven solutions to help working Minnesotans thrive. And I'm here to speak in favor of House File 4994. I'm sure you all are aware Minnesota faces a severe housing crisis caused by a shortage of affordable homes, and that problem is getting worse. Now, thankfully, most sources of public financing for affordable housing have strong labor standards, and this is critically important because wage theft and exploitation are persistent problems in the multifamily housing construction industry. Unfortunately, two of the largest sources of public financing for affordable housing, low-income housing tax credits, or LIHTC, and tax increment financing, or TIF, are lacking in important safeguards for workers. In November, North Star Policy Action released our report called Subsidizing Abuse. This report named contractors that have been charged with or face allegations of exploitation according to interviews with workers and industry experts. We identified housing developments that have received funding from LIHTC and TIF and are employing the problem contractors that we named. We found that since 2016, workers on 25 projects that received approximately $31 million in LIHTC funding were at risk of exploitation by these problem contractors. And since 2018, workers on 14 projects that received approximately $53 million in TIF subsidies were also at risk. In total, over $84 million in taxpayer subsidies have gone to projects employing contractors with proven or alleged labor violations. Now, when we say things like labor violations, worker exploitation, and wage theft, it can sound very general and like a lot of legalese. In our report, what we're talking about are contractors who have refused to pay their workers wages and offered them illegal drugs instead, or used child labor, or threatened to fire a woman for reporting sexual assault on the job, or for covering up serious workplace injuries. If you're a contractor who is guilty of abuses like these, you shouldn't be working on publicly subsidized projects. It's as simple as that. And developers need to be held responsible for the contractors that they hire. That's why this bill is so important. Expanding prevailing wage requirements to low-income housing tax credit and TIF projects will protect workers on those job sites and across the industry from depressed wages and a race to the bottom that can occur on competitively bid projects. So thank you for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you, Mr. Schweitzer. John Bosch. On deck is Brad Smith. Please just identify yourself for the record as you get started with your testimony. Welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, my name is John Beshy. I'm here on behalf of the Associated Builders and Contractors. Thank you for the opportunity to provide comment on House File 4994. ABC is a trade association made up of 240 commercial and industrial contractors and their 20,000 plus employees. These men and women are part of the 75% of workers in the construction industry that choose to be merit shop craft professionals. Our members and their highly skilled professionals take pride in their work and get the job done regardless of the project requirements. ABC is fundamentally opposed to the expansion of prevailing wage mandates, and we are concerned with all of the mandates in this bill, particularly with the expansion that includes certain projects funded with TIF assistance, which consists solely of local property taxes and do not include funding from the state. These mandates will have the unintended consequence of limiting competition, increasing the cost of construction, and resulting in overall higher project costs, which in some cases will be passed on to the consumers and local taxpayers. These increased costs will be imposed without any increase in quality or value and no guarantee that the work will be performed by local contractors. There are numerous studies that show that prevailing wage mandates increase costs, but more important than any study is the actual experience of the local contractors who perform this work. Our local Minnesota contractor members have reported increased costs due to various prevailing wage mandates, oftentimes with a cost increase of at least 10 to 15%, with an even greater cost difference in greater Minnesota. In fact, just this last year, local ABC contractors were awarded a contract to perform work for a school district in southwestern Minnesota. The project was initially bid with the prevailing wage requirement, but after seeing the inflated costs driven by this mandate, the school district rebid the project at market-based wages. It was completed on time, on budget, and built by hardworking local merit shop craft professionals. Finally, I just have to say that any insinuation that the absence of prevailing wage leads to lower labor standards or lower quality work are without merit. Such insinuations are an insult to both local contractors who do great work in their communities, as well as the thousands of craft professionals who proudly perform high-quality work day after day, regardless of whether prevailing wage is paid. Rather than enact policies that infringe on local decision-making, increase costs, and make it more difficult for high-quality contractors to compete, we believe the state should be encouraging policies that promote fair and open competition in the construction industry to obtain the best value. We respectfully request a no vote on House File 4994, and I thank the committee for the opportunity to provide comment.
Thank you, Mr. Beshy, for your testimony. Up next is Brad Smith. On deck is Tim Marks. Welcome to the committee. Please state your name as you get started with your testimony.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. Good afternoon. My name is Brad Smith, and I represent Jaybird Companies, a multi-trade subcontractor that employs Minnesotans from all over the state. Today, I want to discuss HF 4994 and specifically the current law that requires paying overtime for anything over 8 hours a day on state prevailing wage projects. We believe it is unintended consequences for both our workers and our business and is not in alignment with federal prevailing wage, which requires overtime over 40 hours per week. Many of our skilled tradespeople travel for work. Spending days away from home, being on the road, or commuting for work 5 days a week instead of 4 disrupts their ability to efficiently manage their time off the job. Under the structure, for someone living more than an hour away from the job site, it could mean an additional 10 hours away from family each week. Our employees choose to work 4 days, 4-day work weeks. We operate this way because it is what our employees want. Expanding prevailing wage rules requires careful handling of employee data. Privacy is very important, and as an employer, it is our responsibility to protect our employees' private information. We are concerned with who will manage compliance and protect employee data at the local levels for projects requiring prevailing wages. The true cost goes beyond the work site. Imagine an electrician away from home 5 days a week instead of 4. The strains of family relationships, child care arrangements, and mental well-being. By requiring the structure of work days, we risk sacrifice a crucial aspect of our workers' lives, their ability to maintain a healthy home environment. We urge policymakers to consider the unintended consequences that HF 4994 will have on future development in our communities and also the direct impact this will have on worker lives and families. If developers decide to move their project to other states, would this mean reduced development in Minnesota and the need to lay off skilled tradespeople?
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Appreciate your testimony. Up next, Tim Marks. On deck, John Thorson. Welcome to the committee. Please just state your name as you go ahead with your testimony, Mr. Marks.
Chair Gomez and members of the committee, my name is Tim Marks, and I'm with the law firm of Winthrop and Weinstein. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today. I urge the committee not to support House File 4994. I am not testifying today on behalf of any interest or organization, but rather based upon my years of experience in working in affordable housing. For example, as Commissioner of the Minnesota Housing Finance Agency and as a nonprofit housing developer with Catholic Charities. And I currently serve on the board of the Twin Cities Housing Alliance and on the National Alliance to End Homelessness, and work daily with many of our great affordable housing developers, both for-profit and nonprofit. My successor as commissioner, Mary Tingerthal, and I collaborate on many affordable housing initiatives. I have consulted with Commissioner Tingerthal, who agrees with the 4 points that I will make. Point 1, this committee knows well the critical housing shortage that we have and the impact on businesses and families throughout the state. Commissioner Tingerthal and I and the other former commissioners have called this a house on fire emergency. Point number 2, our housing industry, our for-profit and nonprofit affordable housing developers are in significant distress. The costs are increasing, the revenues are decreasing, and the tenants are not getting the support that they need and richly deserve to maintain their housing stability. These challenges are documented in a recently released Federal Reserve Bank of Minneapolis report, which I have included in your packets. Point 3, HF 994 would add fuel to our housing emergency. It would increase the cost of affordable housing in today's already high interest rate and high cost environment. Some housing developments would not go forward. For those that do, additional subsidy would be required.
Mr. Marks, we're at time, so if you could just wrap up.
Yep.
Thank
The
you.
Department of Revenue analysis understates the cost, and that should be considered. And please consider the law of unintended consequences. Please do not move forward with this bill, and instead focus your time on providing additional resources and tools to preserve and provide new homes for those that desperately need it.
Thank you, Mr. Marks. Up next, John Thorson. Welcome to the committee. Please just say your name as you get started with your testimony.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. For the record, my name is John Thorson. I'm Legislative Director for LiUNA, Minnesota and North Dakota. We're Minnesota's infrastructure union representing more than 14,000 skilled construction laborers who build and maintain our state's critical infrastructure. I'm here today to support House File 4994, a bill to ensure that projects supported by TIF and LITEC or exemption from sales tax on construction materials are covered by prevailing wage in a manner consistent with similar projects that receive support from other public sources, such as state bonding or grants and tax credits for economic development purposes. Both wage theft and tax fraud are pervasive in the construction sector of our economy. Prevailing wage policies prevent an aggressive race to the bottom that incentivizes unlawful employment practices and reduces the risk of misclassification and tax fraud through greater payroll transparency. In 2021, a Midwest EPI report found that over 30,100 Minnesota construction workers are either misclassified or paid off the books, and that accounts for 23% of workers in the construction industry. Further, prevailing wage policies achieve these goals with the most minimal cost impacts on housing projects. Another report from 2021 peer-reviewed study in the International Journal of Employment Relations disputes the cost impacts and instead found modest impacts of prevailing wage on overall project cost. They further concluded that the modest cost impacts were likely explained by the widespread prevalence of illegal or undesirable employment practices, such as widespread misclassification in the housing industry generally. Madam Chair, I want to thank Representative Coulter for bringing forward this proposal and strongly encourage members of this committee to support House File 4994 because it'll help break the pattern of problem contractors working on publicly subsidized projects and help prevent worker exploitation by guaranteeing family-sustaining wages on these projects. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Thorson. All right, is there anybody else present who wishes to testify on House File 4994? Not seeing any, we'll go to member discussion. Representative Anderson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll be very brief. I just want to point out, the State Auditor's Office has a TIF division that's probably still very excellent and oversees this, and I'm sure is doing a really good job overseeing this. So I want to just mention that since we talked about no oversight on TIF. I think that's not accurate. I just also am opposed to this bill. It drives up costs, and I know there's been a lot of discussion in this legislature about housing costs and affordable housing, and it got mixed in with the zoning, and that apparently is dead, thank goodness, for a while. But this is exactly the sort of thing that's driving up our housing costs. And the more we sit and regulate things and make it more and more difficult to build for the builders and for the cities and everyone involved, the higher the costs go. And so we can't have it both ways. So I'm just want to speak out against this. Thank you.
Representative Olson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. One of the testifiers used the vocabulary word modest increase. I'm just kind of would be curious what that definition of modest increase is. Usually from all the research that I've seen is that we're seeing anywhere between a 7%, which may be a modest increase, to 25 to 30% increase on the cost of a project utilizing prevailing wages. When the taxpayers of the state of Minnesota are spending $1 and getting 70 cents out of it for the same price, I think that's a problem. I also believe, we're talking about prevailing wage, it's not a one-size-fits-all. It's actually not even an 87-size-fits-all. If you look at the way that construction prevailing wage is actually determined, it's by county. But if I look at a number of counties, I see something called that looks like an asterisk right next to it. And you look at the asterisk and it says, we're utilizing data from a different county. Now, one of my counties, the average house, the price of a house in that county is $150,000. And then I've got another county within my district, and the average cost is $300,000. So between two counties that border each other that would qualify with that asterisk, you're seeing a double cost in the price of a house. So it's not perfect. It's not right to ask our taxpayers to use this as a measurement when it's not entirely right. The equation needs to work out. Well, I've got two questions for the author of the bill. First of all, you said that without this aid, these projects generally would not happen. Now, with a 30% increase in cost, potentially, or a modest one, if that's what 7% is, how do we see this happening? Do you honestly believe that these projects will occur when you said personally that they would not happen without the aid? And secondly, when we're talking about prevailing wage, how is requiring prevailing wage with these forms of projects, how are they going to prevent people from attempting to do the bad actor stuff, paying individuals in drugs? How is that mandate that I pay you $28.50 an hour for your labor job, how is that going to prevent me from paying you in drugs or paying you in anything else or being a bad actor myself? Can you please answer that question?
Representative Coulter.
Excuse me. Excuse me. Sorry about that. Thank you, Madam Chair. And I guess I would start off by saying that the claims around prevailing wage and how it affects costs, some that have been put forward here, I think aren't really backed up by the data. In particular, the phrase was used, several studies show a certain effect that it raises costs. But what that claim left out is that there are 3 times as many studies that show no impact on the cost of construction. Since 2018, peer-reviewed studies have been done on prevailing wage requirements. 13 show no effect. So and that includes all manner of projects. There was a study done of more than 4,000 schools built across the country that found no significant cost difference. And there are similar results for highways, affordable housing, municipal projects, sort of run the gamut there. So I think we just need to be clear that it is simply not accurate to say with any real certainty that prevailing wage does increase costs. And I'm sorry, I've forgotten your second question now.
Representative Olson.
I'm just asking how requiring a prevailing wage would prevent a bad actor from paying in drugs.
Representative Coulter.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and apologies for forgetting the question there. I think this represents just another tool in the toolbox. Is it a silver bullet? Is it going to completely eliminate every problem within the contracting system and within the construction industry? No, I don't think anyone can say that. But we have had a prevailing wage law on the books in Minnesota for over 50 years. Our Department of Labor and Industry is experienced with enforcing it. Are there things they could do better? Undoubtedly. But I think this just gives us another tool in addressing that particular issue.
Representative Olson.
That's my final, just kind of wrap it up here. I promise, Madam Chair, thank you. So correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm looking at this North Star Policy Action Report, and I'm looking through all the potential examples of bad actors. From my understanding, none of these are legal even now without prevailing wage. You can't actually pay someone with drugs. You can't actually steal their wages from. This is a bad actor doing bad things. Requiring them to pay $28 an hour when they're not actually paying to begin with, that doesn't fix the problem. It's in fact illegal to do these no matter what we do with this bill, correct?
I mean, that's really a statement, isn't it?
It is.
Okay.
But correct or not correct?
You're correct.
I think so.
Okay, David's answered your question. Representative Howard.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Representative Coulter, for bringing the bill forward. Of course, you all know I care deeply about us addressing our housing crisis and agree with many of the things that Mr. Mark said. But I would submit that we're talking about a false choice here. We should not set up a false choice that because we either need to build more housing or we can be comfortable with worker exploitation. That is not the case. We can build homes the right way, and we can build them with respect for our workers. And I don't see how anybody can look at this report and say that we don't have a problem here. $50 million that have went to worker exploitation from publicly funded efforts. And prevailing wage, to Representative Olson's point, prevailing wage has worked well to prevent those types of things that, so to answer your question, when you have prevailing wage, you have better labor standards. You don't have people paying in drugs or some of the other really bad things detailed in this report. And so we absolutely need to be all hands on deck. It's why we can't, in one hand of our mouths, say we're going to oppose efforts to build more housing. and in another sense, say that, oh, we can't do prevailing wage. That's why we do need to pass other bills that will legalize more housing choices across the state of Minnesota. But this bill is a fundamental principle that I think we should all share, which is that when you build homes, you shouldn't do so on the backs of the workers that are building them.
Thank you. Representative Lislegard.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's probably, it's not the wage. I would think it's the reporting to Dolly that is what's going to hold people accountable, right? So anytime we talk about guardrails on all this stuff, well, the accountability comes from the reporting. So, I mean, obviously, everybody knows I'm a union guy, and this isn't union versus non-union. I believe everybody should be paid a good livable wage and try to put in mechanisms where people can't cheat the system or cheat the people that are doing the work. So if I was to look at this, I would just say that I think a lot of people don't want to do the reporting, and the reporting is about accountability. Thank you for bringing it forward.
Thank you. Representative Davids.
Well,
We're going a couple minutes over. Hope everybody's good. But
Well, for me, I think it's good.
Okay. Okay. Well, that's all that matters. I was only asking
Thank
you.
you, Madam Chair.
Yeah.
This bill makes no sense. This is a horrible, horrible bill. We had somebody testify that we have a severe housing crisis. This makes it worse. This bill opposes building more housing. Do the economics. If you're charging, whatever the number, 7% to 30% more, how can the author say that there's no impact on number of housing units? There has to be. It just doesn't come out of the air. Simple, simple economics says that if you support this bill, you're supporting less low-income housing being built. Here we go again, hurting the poor. I refuse to do that. Members, this is a horrible, horrible bill that's going to have fewer housing units. And in the meantime, I'm going to be asking staff, what is the actual percent increase in cost, so we kind of know what it is, and how many fewer low-income housing projects are going to be done because of this? And then all this stuff about rape and drugs and all this kind of stuff, I think it was Abraham Lincoln said, you don't build yourself up by tearing others down. That testimony was horrible. This, as Representative Olson said, this is against the law. What's in this report? This is against the law. Enforce the law. It's already there. This bill has nothing to do with this. And I'm just ashamed that somebody would come in and bring things up like this on a bill that we're discussing here today. It's unconscionable, that testimony from two of the testifiers. So I'm not going to support a bill when we have a severe housing crisis that is guaranteed to allow fewer units to be built. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
And wasn't that worth it going overtime on that?
Yeah, TBD.
Questionable, I'm sure.
Questionable, highly questionable. We're just going to go ahead and respect the people who come in front of our committee to offer their testimony, regardless of whether we agree with them or not, please. To your bill, Representative Coulter, any closing comments?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I will be brief in respect of folks' times. I first of all want to say that I am deeply, deeply concerned about the costs of building housing in the state of Minnesota. In fact, lack of affordable housing in my community was the reason I ran for office in the first place. It's why, for example, I'm the House author of a bill that would address mandatory parking minimums, which we know can add on average $10,000 a space, if not more. So I care very deeply about this. But I also want to be clear, that's not just me saying that prevailing wage does not have an effect on cost. It's the folks who have actually done the work and done the studies and looked at the aggregates and looked at how things work out. We can rely on anecdotal reports all we want. If I relied on an anecdotal report, my 5-year-old would be telling me to carry a bill that says that the last 45 minutes of Frozen 2 is the best movie ever made. I don't think I'm going to be doing that. So I just want to be clear about what the reality is, what the data says, versus what our own opinions might show. So to sort of close things out, you know, in my time, I served on the Bloomington Housing and Redevelopment Authority before and during my time on the City Council. And I saw a number of projects that would not have moved forward without this aid. So these are critically important tools. And we need to also recognize that for more than 50 years, our prevailing wage law has provided valuable protections for workers and ensured that publicly funded projects are rightly held to standards that align with Minnesotans' values and expectations and that should be no different for publicly financed projects. At the end of the day, Minnesotans deserve to know that their public dollars are not subsidizing worker exploitation and abuse. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Coulter. With that, I will renew my motion that House File 4994, as amended, be laid over for possible inclusion in the 2024 tax bill, and it is laid over. Members, the next meeting will be Tuesday, April 9th. We'll be hearing more bills. With that, we are adjourned.